Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. And Montgomery, thank you so much for coming back to the Mike Litton Experience. So this is round 2. This is so cool. You have a new project coming up. I'm super excited to talk about it. I'm also super excited to see you again, and I'm really excited for our time together.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Mike. I'm glad to be here. Always happy to chat.
So let's talk about so you have a few, how many books have you written so far? There's 5 or 6?
I've written 9, but
9, okay, 9.
6 are published.
6 are, okay, so there's 6 that are out. So this is number 7 that's coming.
No, this is number 6.
Oh, number 6, okay. So number 6 is a little bit of a detour for you. Would you say that?
Absolutely. All my other 5 books all take place in Arizona, which is where I've lived for 30 years. And they're about all different things. They're about societal issues and archaeological looting and post-traumatic stress and environmentalism, all kinds of things. But this is absolutely a detour. And let me backtrack a little and explain how I came to write this book. My dearest friend, a woman I met in television when I got my first TV job 40 years ago, asked me to be her healthcare power of attorney. She had to have a possibly horrible surgery. It was a horrible surgery, but she could have woken up paralyzed from the waist down. Her husband is a soldier. He was in Iraq and Afghanistan. He has terrible post-traumatic stress, can't be in hospitals because of things that happened over there. And so I was her healthcare power of attorney. And the night before the surgery, we're in Baltimore, and she hands me this Ziploc bag full of yellowed letters. She said, "No matter what happens to me, I want you to tell Bud's story." And because I felt so badly what she was facing, we were all upset about the surgery. Would she survive? And I said, "Of course." And I promised. And then she, went through the surgery, walked out of the hospital, and I had made this promise. And it was the only thing we had left from this man was this packet of letters. He never came home. He was in the Graves Registration Service, which is a part of the military that gets absolutely no attention. Yeah. These are the men that locate, identify, and bury the dead. Now think about that. Okay. And I followed this man from the postmarks on his letters to Normandy, to the Battle of the Bulge. He was with Patton in Czechoslovakia. He was all over. And when you go to Europe, or we have 36 American cemeteries worldwide, where American soldiers, sailors, Marines, whoever, they're all buried. And you can go to them. If you go to Normandy, there's a massive cemetery. And Bud and his men probably built that one. And they followed the battles and picked up the pieces. And when I was doing my research, I could find very little about the men in the Graves Registration Service. And then I found a book called Crosses in the Winds, which was written in 1947 by a lieutenant colonel who had been a captain in that service, who gave me actual events, they went to the killing fields of Malmedy. They were at concentration camps. They were in all the battles, and the things these men faced were absolutely horrendous. And this was way before anybody thought about mental health issues.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And they expected these guys, no problem, go pick up that guy's foot and try to figure out who it belonged to. There was one specific situation that happened like weeks after Normandy. These guys were trucked back to the beach, and they said, "See out there, there's a Higgins boat. Higgins boats where the guys offloaded. It got hit by a shell. It turned over. There were guys in there. We have to get them out. No scuba tanks, like 8 feet of water. And these men had to strip down to their skivvies and go in and try to pick up what was left weeks later. Now, and nobody even said, "Hey, you guys feeling all right? Is this okay?" So I wrote a book about Bud Richardville, who was a sergeant in that group.
So the letters were written to whom?
They were written to his mother. They were written to his brother-in-law. They were written to his. Now he also, before Bud left, he married a woman he barely knew. He knew her like a week. It was very strange. And I don't know, have you ever heard of the allotment Annies?
Mm-mm.
These are women who, I mean, the military knew about this. They made videos and warned the men about these women. These were women who married soldiers who were just going off to war. They were looking for a paycheck. These boys were naive, coming from farms, they didn't know much better. And they believed these women loved them and they married them. And then the women would get their paycheck, weekly
Wow.
paycheck. $20, a lot of money back then, like $360 a week today. And then if they were killed, they got a $10,000 check. A death benefit. So though we don't have complete proof of this, his wife, Lorraine, who went by numerous names, was mysterious. We're fairly certain that's what she was. And it was heartbreaking for him. And this happened a lot. The military said, please don't marry anybody right before you leave. Please don't marry somebody you don't know. But they were young and thought they were in love,
Well, it's hard though, because here they are, in a brand new relationship. That's when everything is hot and heavy and super exciting and all that kind of thing, right? And they're leaving.
Right.
And whether the woman has, designs on this deal or not, it's hard because you don't know if you're coming back.
Right.
You're going to make decisions. Let's be honest about this. You're going to make decisions when you're potentially going somewhere to die that you might not make if you were in a regular situation. I mean, you might make them anyway, right? Because men can be impetuous. It happens. I'm one of them. But if you're facing something like this, it accelerates I guess the gene that makes bad decisions, right?
It's why there were so many Dear John letters.
Yeah.
Or that they brought home war brides from Italy or France or wherever they were. And then they got here and went, oh crap, we don't even know each other.
Yeah.
So it was like that. And then there was the fear that maybe you were missing out, that if you weren't married, you were missing out on something. You might die and have missed out on marriage. Or in some cases with these young men, sex.
Yeah.
So military knew it was happening, but they couldn't. And they only prosecuted one or two women for this, and one married 6 sailors. I can't think of her name offhand. The only reason they caught her is 2 sailors in a bar in Australia were showing pictures of their wives. Same woman. That's the only reason they caught her. So yeah, they were called allotment Annies. Now I don't have proof that his wife was one of these people, but it's pretty the fact.
It sort of sounds like the circumstances there.
Yeah, because she was brutal to him. And then there were quiet family whispers of another woman in Europe.
Yeah. So tell us about him as a person. So where did he grow up? Where was he?
He grew up in Vincennes, Indiana.
Okay.
Abject poverty.
Okay.
Abject poverty.
Yeah.
And the weird thing was right behind his house was a railroad track. And in this time it was Depression era, and people would hop on the train and hold on to go wherever they wanted to get to. People didn't have cars. They were trying to travel. So periodically someone would fall off and get killed. And Bud and other people would say, we got to go collect another body. And he'd be asked to help pick up the pieces of these bodies that were on the track. And then the sheriff would come and take them away.
As a civilian?
Yeah, he was just a kid, but they were right behind his house. So what I think happened is when he went to boot camp, they put you through that process where, you're a cook. Okay, fine. We'll make you cook. And he was, now I have no proof of this. This is just what I'm pretty sure happened. And they said, how do you feel about dead bodies? And he went, oh, well, I collected them when I was a kid. He was also a logger. He went to Michigan and worked in the logging industry. And originally he worked on the rivers as what they called a river pig. And he would stand on the logs and men died all the time. Yeah. And he would fish bodies out of the water. So when they said, how do you feel about bodies? He went, oh, they don't bother me. Boom, Graves Registration Service. Yeah. And the men who got put in that room where it said Graves Registration Service were like, what are you talking about? We came to shoot the enemy, not to pick up bodies, and they couldn't get out of it. That was what it was. But from my understanding, Bud was he was an even keel, good looking, nice guy. Everybody loved him. Yeah. And he was like, look, if this is what the military wants me to do, this is what I'll do. He becomes a sergeant
Yeah.
Mostly because he's older than everybody else. He was about 29, and he didn't get drafted earlier because he worked in the paper industry. He became a manager in a paper, where the logs ended up.
Mhm.
And paper, you had to have paper. It was like a war. It was required by war. So
Sure.
that's where he worked. And then they said, no, we're going to draft you. And he was so much older than that kids were 17, 18, 19. And he ended up becoming a sergeant before he was sent over. So
Yeah,
he
so
was,
paper back then was an essential industry.
yes,
Kind of like back
essentially.
during COVID, for those that remember, there were certain industries that were deemed essential and they
Right.
could stay open during the shutdown.
Right. My father was working for Westinghouse as an
Yeah.
apprentice, and so he wasn't drafted right away because they needed Westinghouse to keep producing war products. So
Yeah.
it was the same way. So that's what happened. But so he was quite a bit older than the other men.
Mhm.
And when they got there, and as soon as they hit the beach at Normandy, I mean, it was clear what had to happen. And they didn't just pick up Allied soldiers; they had to deal with the German soldiers.
Mhm.
Whatever bodies were there, and this was a morale issue, not and a health issue. You can't have 1,000 bodies floating around and hitting a beach. There's disease, and then you've got more guys
The
coming through the
biohazard. Yeah.
beaches who are going, "Holy crap! There's dead
Yeah.
people everywhere." So you had to do it fast. They actually buried a lot of guys right near the beaches, and then had to go back and dig them back up and put them in real graves later. Think about this, the
It's
horror of this. And yet you never see them in a movie. You never read about them in a book, except for the book that I found, Crosses in the Wind. And that's a nonfiction book. So my book is inspired by Bud's story. I don't have all the facts. In 1973, the military records depository in St. Louis burned down.
yeah.
And 80% of all of the Army's military records from 1912 to 1960 were destroyed. So
Yeah.
I didn't have access to Bud's actual records. I had to do it through the postmarks on the letters, and they were dated, and I followed exactly where he was. Later on, when I got a copy of his obituary, it turns out I was right everywhere I followed him. And also from stories his family told, he still has about 100 family members.
Hmm.
In fact, I'm going to their family reunion.
Oh, that's cool.
They're all excited about the book, and so,
Sure.
Labor Day weekend, I'm gonna go to Indiana and meet them.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, but, is it like Band of Brothers that was exact? No, it's not. It's inspired by Bud's story.
Well, but let's talk about this for a second, because there's a reason. So we saw this post 9/11. Okay. There were a lot of people that ended up volunteering to be in the military that simply never even imagined that they would ever shoot a gun, let alone get in the military. But because of what happened with 9/11 and that patriotic sense of service and making a difference, right? They signed up.
Right.
There's a reason why they call Bud and members of his generation the greatest generation, because they really did sacrifice a great deal. And part of what happened in this whole thing was we sort of put off a lot as a nation in terms of getting involved in World War II. We got involved pretty late.
Yes, we did.
And we had a lot of loss of life and a lot of American treasure that was spent because we waited.
I couldn't
And we
agree
shouldn't
more.
have, right?
Yes, exactly. But
And NATO is a reaction to that, of course. The North American Treaty Organization, or North Atlantic, pardon me, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is NATO is the response to that, right? So an attack on Article 5, attack on one is attack on all, kind of thing. That was sort of living and learning, right? And to their credit, to these governments' credit, they learned from it. But man, what an unbelievable toll to learn a lesson like that. I mean, and then and then they were, people don't talk about this, but the Battle of the Bulge was a real risk, and it could have gone either way. I mean, it was sort of a roll of the dice, right?
Well, it was actually it was kind of Germany's last big push. I mean, Hitler was a mess at that point. he was a drug addict. His doctor was filling him full of drugs. He was not rational. And when he pulled 400,000 troops, I think it was, from the Russian front
Right.
and slammed them into the Ardennes, that was a bad move on his part. He also took, I can't even remember the number of planes and tanks and stuff. And when they initially attacked, they had all these brand new American troops there that thought they were in a safe place. Nobody expected that to happen. And so it was such a horrible slog. It was the winter. Our soldiers didn't even have overcoats. They didn't have boots. They didn't have gloves. And yet, we went on and on. It went on for weeks and weeks, and it was horrible. And then think about Bud and his men and what they had to do after that, following right behind.
Yeah. Well, but what I'm saying is a lot of people who talked about this beforehand. Now that we look back on it, hindsight being 2020, right? But a lot of the planners that looked at this ahead of time thought that the generals that planned this were out of their minds. And as it turned out,
I mean, from the German side.
No, from the US side. So a lot of the people that were watching all this happen, these decisions being made on the US side, were basically standing back going, this is a big risk. This is right, because over all those years, the German forces had proven themselves to be battle worthy. They had proven themselves, and they were in a superior position. We were storming that beach, and they were firing down on our people, right? I mean, this was a major risk on the part of the leadership of the military to even try this, let alone to succeed. And like you said, it went on for days and days and days.
But without the American, it was basically, we had more people. We had more men. And it's sad to me that because of World War I, we became complete isolationists.
Exactly.
Nobody wanted to go back. And the men in charge then had lived through World War I, the most horrible war, because before World War I, war was glorious. Men went marching off in their fancy uniforms. Everybody waved and threw flowers. And isn't that great? They'll be back in a week. And then they went to World War I, which was horrible, poisonous trench warfare that was miserable. And people, maybe war isn't what we think it is. It changed the way we look at war. And people went, we're not doing that again. We're not going back over. And if we'd gone a year sooner, 2 years, I don't think there would have been the carnage that ended up, but they needed our population. Those countries are little. They do not have, and the Germans did not want us involved. I think they were, frankly, quite annoyed when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and went, oh crap, we don't want the Americans involved in this. There are too many of them. They've got, they can whip out production. They can make planes and ammunition and stuff much more quickly than we can. However, we sat and let the Germans rearm themselves. We let them start telling their kids at 8 years old, you're going to fight the fatherland. It's all about the fatherland. So they were building an army for years when we weren't. Took us a while to catch up.
Yeah. And it took us a while to pay attention too.
Yep.
Right?
People didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, because there were all kinds of atrocities happening. This Holocaust that took place, all these things that were taking place right under our noses. We knew about it.
We knew.
We absolutely knew about it.
Yep.
But
my mother, who's going to be 99, told me that they would go to the movies and an announcement would come and they say, we're going to show you a newsreel now and do not turn away. And it was some of the death camps. And my mother was horrified. She said, and so when people say, well, they didn't know about it, that's not true. They knew. They knew. And
they just turned a blind eye.
Yep. They didn't want to go back to World War I.
Yeah, it's the ostrich syndrome, right? When something really bad happens, people bury their head in the sand. And that was the last thing that they should have done. And so Bud coming in, so the troops that went ahead of him were basically turning the tide, because let's be honest, Germany was just literally taking Europe. They were just, I mean, these European countries didn't hardly put up a fight. And all of a sudden, they're marching clear across Europe. And now here we come from the West Coast of Europe, right? Here we come, and we're going to push them back from the beach, and they're up there in superior positions. I mean, this thing is rough, and it's probably one of the roughest battles our armed forces have ever been in. And Bud and his crew had to come in and mop it up.
Yep.
I mean, unbelievable.
And it went on, the mopping up went on and on and on because they'd collect the bodies, identify them best they could, bury them, build the cemetery, bury them,
And
and
then
move
more
on
would
to
wash on shore.
and then also they got traded around. Like they say, we need a graves registration unit to go up here. And they kept moving them from place to place wherever there'd be bodies found, or a plane went down. They'd say there's a plane that might have 10 guys in it. If a bomber went down, you got 10 guys gone.
Yeah.
And so they'd have to go and pick up the pieces. When people go, well, everybody didn't come home from World War II. I'm like, of course not. Some of them, there wasn't much left to come home.
Right.
You know,
To bring
so
home, yeah.
this was, I believe it's the hardest job in the military. Now,
Yeah.
today we don't do this. There are people that pick up the dead, but we bring them home. They're
Yeah.
sent right home. They're not buried in foreign graves anymore. They did that. They asked the family members, do you wish to have your loved one return? If not, we'll give you a check. And now you can never get them. In fact, my friend Regina, who is Bud's niece,
Mhm.
we wanted to go bring Bud home and bury him with his family, but the
Mhm.
military owns him now, what's ever left of him.
Okay.
So he's buried in Epinal, France, in the American cemetery there, buried by his own men. So
That's something.
mhm.
So how did he die?
That depends on who you ask.
Oh boy.
Yeah, because there was always some question about how Bud died.
Hmm.
And if you ask the military, it was a tragic Jeep accident. He was killed on a train track in a Jeep at midnight, just outside of Cooperley, France. And the war in Europe had ended. We know that all of the men he served with, who I sense he was very close to, were reassigned, and he got orders to go to the Pacific to keep picking up bodies.
Hmm.
His mother received a letter saying he served honorably, was killed in a tragic accident. His wife received the same letter. And yet Regina and I were suspicious.
Mhm.
And so she contacted the cemetery where he's buried,
Mhm.
and a Marine who ran the place was very kind, Juan Martinez, and he said, let me pull his burial card. And he pulled the card, and when they buried them, they put name, where they came from, where they died, time and date. And then there's a box for honors.
Mhm.
You participated in the Battle of the Bulge. You won a Silver Star. Your unit got an accommodation.
Heart, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Bud's was blank. He got nothing. And we know through his letters, his unit got an accommodation for their work at the Battle of the Bulge.
Mhm.
And Juan Martinez told us that the Army would remove his honors if they thought he committed suicide. So he was buried with no honors, nothing. He has a cross.
So they thought. So there was a suspicion that he committed suicide. Sounds like he may have.
Yeah. Well, reading his
Considering,
letters.
well, I'm just saying, considering, where he was headed, right?
Right.
Wow.
But in
What
the
a
letter
sad story.
home, they said he served honorably. So we are now fighting to get his honors restored
Yeah.
because he either served honorably or he did not.
Right.
And the military didn't want to deny a widow or a mother a paycheck,
Yeah.
but then they should have left his honors intact.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So we're fighting that right now, which is hard. It's been 80 years.
Yeah.
But in my mind, even if Bud did commit suicide, he served his country.
Yeah.
Served his
Well,
country.
it's a fight worth fighting. And we don't know for sure that he committed suicide, right? It's just a suspicion.
His last letter home to his mother was signed, "Your forgotten son." That's how he signed it.
Now, let me ask you this. It's the title of your book.
Yes.
Why? Why do you think because you probably have more information than most, other than his family, of course. Why do you think he signed it, "Your forgotten son"?
I from his letters, you can see this gregarious, nice guy who protected the young soldiers. Whenever they had a problem, they'd go to him. He wasn't the sergeant who screamed and yelled and threw things. He
Yeah.
was the guy who tried to fix things.
Yeah.
He was a nice, even keel man, not highly educated, but a good guy.
Yeah.
Okay. I saw the decline in the letters.
Oh my gosh.
I saw how his wife, there was some problem with his wife and his family, and they were fighting, and she hated them and said, you come home, I'm never going to see your family again. It was horrible. So he's got this problem with his family and his wife. There was, there was a baby, maybe, the baby died. Did it? Was there a baby? All of these questions hounded him. And then every day he goes out and picks up dead bodies.
Yeah.
And buries them and tries to figure out who they are. So I saw the decline in what, and when he signed it, Your Forgotten Son at the end, I realized that he had disintegrated a lot. And if you're wondering why the book is called Your Forgotten Sons, it's because I wrote it for all of them.
Yeah.
For all of those who served in the Graves Registration Service.
Yeah.
And the fact that nobody ever thought maybe these guys need.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.